Hello students, in our last class we discussed the modern state introduced by the Britishers and the way they introduced the law in India. For example, rights, liberty, equality, justice, these very modern phenomena considering the conservative or traditional nature of Indian society at that time. So, at that time, the colonial state was highly modern in nature, and Indian society was equally traditional, or highly conservative. So, at that time, various law was passed, which we also discussed in our previous lecture, that anti-sati bill or any effort which says that women are equal to men. For example, suppose if someone is saying that women are equal to men during those days, so it created a kind of panic among Indian society at that time. How can a woman be equal to men? So the Britishers continued introducing various social reforms, number one, and number two, various law, okay, which was suitable for Indian society to curb or control or eradicate the ill practices which was prevalent among Indian people, whether it is Hindus or Muslims, and so on and so forth. So they introduced modern laws and modern institutions. That is what we discussed in our previous video. Why did they do it? We simply had 2 points of view. One is for their own good. They want to rule this country according to their own convenience, number one. And number two, it was good for the Indian society, always. Okay. So, because of this, because of this introduction of various laws, various reforms through institutions, okay, we saw many ill practices completely removed from the Indian society. For example, sati tradition, okay. Many conservative practices among Hindus and Muslims came to an end. Casteism was criminalized. There was equality of individuals during that time. And now you can imagine now how that feeling was when someone is saying that a lower caste is equal to someone who is a bit higher in rank. I will not say upper caste, but higher in rank, because upper caste is just one community in India. So this higher and lower hierarchy wala stuff was completely eradicated from Indian society through introduction of various laws, various modern institutions, or in short, various modern customs or modern state, whatever you call it. What would be the result? The result was massive protest against the Britishers, because India's conservative society was not ready to accept the modern values, the modern laws, the modern institutions, okay, and many modern stuffs which was introduced by the Britishers. So Indian conservative society found itself unable to cope up with, okay, but Britishers simply continued with their introduction of various laws, introduction of various institutions, eradication of patriarchy, or trying to eradicate patriarchy, or declaring casteism as undemocratic and criminal offense, and so on and so forth. But at least Hindus and Muslims consider it as attack on their religion, as we all know. Sorry. Now, if you see, there is a famous quotation. What was that quotation? Quotation is कि if you want to understand any society, understand that state. If you understand any state, you will obviously understand the society. This was a famous slogan, and this was very popular among various societies, not in India but in Europe, in Western societies, and so on and so forth. Here, the Britishers, mainly two persons. Number one, Lord Macaulay, and there was a civil servant. His name was Charles Trevelyan. So these two British administrators discussed so many things. The time period was 1838 or 34, between 1834 to 1838. See, long before our first war of independence, long before, more than 100 years before our independence, and long before the arrival of Gandhi and extremist phase and so on and so forth. Long before they were discussing all these things. What was their main concern, these two? Their main concern was, they said simply, that any victory which is staged with the help of arm is very precarious victory. Now, if any victory which are won through arms or through attack or warfare activities is precarious, then what is real victory? This was the question both of them were discussing, Lord Macaulay and Charles Trevelyan. What was the real victory? So the real victory is when someone wins or holds the head and heart of the people. The head and heart of the people is known as the real victory. So real victory does not come out of swords or weapons and so on and so forth. But if you win someone's heart, that they discussed. So how to make Indian people convinced that Britishers are not violent, Britishers are not war-loving people, Britishers are not here to exploit Indians, they are here to civilize us, and to make people believe in Britishers, to win their mind and hearts. What should they do? They were discussing what should they do. So just make certain policies entirely for Indians, just to prove that we are here to make you civilized and not to exploit you, just to prove that we are not a violent race, we are not aggressive or aggressor, we are the real democrat. So this was in their mind when between 1834 to 1838. Who were discussing? Lord Macaulay and Charles Trevelyan. Now, if you win someone's heart and mind, that winning is known as hegemony. Okay. So the Britishers said, when when we have done victory or we have won various wars in India, we established a kind of regime in India. So this victory is very precarious. Okay? So if this victory is very precarious, then how can we make India a permanent colony of ours? This is highly impossible because that victory is very precarious in nature. And how to make hegemony among the Indians over Indian society? So this was the question they were discussing. How to win heads and hearts of the people, how to make hegemony among Indian people and society. So introduce various policies, introduced various measures, just to prove that we are here to make you civilized, to make you modernized, and so on and so forth. So therefore, they took the help of Orientalist writing, number one. Number two, they introduced modern education system, which is popularly known as Macaulay education system. So, with or English education system in India. So they did it by taking the help of Orientalist writings. We discussed it, what is Orientalism and what was Orientalist writing. Okay, beginning from Watson, if you remember, then J.S. Mill, Trifurcation of Indian History, and various other Orientalist writers. So they try to convince Indian people that you are not modern and we will make you modern. We will make you more civilized. We are here for your own good. And we are not warriors or say violent and so on and so forth. So first we have to create an image of quote unquote good. That was the first challenge. So they introduced modern education system in India, which is known as Macaulay education system, as you all know. Why they did it? So Charles Trevelyan said, we have to make young people believe that the regime of British in India was good. And British simply do not want to rule India or to loot India, but to modernize Indians, but to reform Indian society, but to completely eradicate various ill practices which were prevalent among Indian people and Indian society. So what they have to do, they had to just convince Indian people that we are not here to rule you, but to make you modernize, but to make you civilized, and so on and so forth. How to do it was a big question. And answer was very simple. What was that? Open universities in India. Education they have introduced the modern education system. Everything now is in English. Earlier, non-interventionist state of Warren Hastings now has become interventionist state under Lord Macaulay. Lord Macaulay simply did not follow non-interventionist approach. State now had become interventionist. State started intervening in various aspects of Indian society, whether it is education or language or culture or ill practices or undemocratic system or inhuman system, sati or casteism, and so on and so forth. So the state became very aggressive, and aggressively it intervened in the society. Now, they tried to convince Indians at that time that we are not here to rule over India, number one, and number two, we are here to modernize you and to civilize you. How to do it? That was the big question. Charles Trevelyan replied, the answer was very simple: open universities in India. So we saw Calcutta University, we saw University of Allahabad, earlier it was known as Allahabad University, Punjab University, and even our own college, Dayal Singh College. It was introduced in 1910 because of this chain of introduction of educational institution by the Britishers. Dayal Singh Majetia introduced various, the Tribune, you might be heard, the Tribune newspaper was started by him. So our college is that much old, Lord Macaulay wala system, but it has slightly different approach. But we saw the rise and opening of various universities and various colleges throughout India through this Macaulay education system. Okay. Except for opening universities as a part of colonial network, the Britishers under Macaulay also opened various printing press, and therefore we saw the rise of newspapers in India. Second, he introduced various banking system in India. So all these things, whatever Macaulay introduced, was to make India modernized. We may criticize modern education, we may have certain reservations on say university system or British education system and so on and so forth, but we must not forget that all these institutions is institution of eminence. Even today, see Calcutta University, Princeton College, or University of Allahabad, or Punjab University, or our college, Dayal Singh College. So there were chains of colleges and university which was opened during British period. Newspaper by introduction of printing press and introduction of banks. So this was done just to prove that we are here to modernize you and not to rule you, number one. And number two, please, we are not violent, we are not barriers, and we are here for your own good, just to convince the Indian masses, the Indian people. Now this was the first concern which they tried to know, successfully implemented it. There was a second concern as well at that time, and that concern was a big worry for the Britishers, a big worry. The worry was how long we means the Britishers, how long we will rule in India. Now the first thing, how to convince people that we are here to make you civilized, or we are not violent, or we are here to modernize you. The first challenge was this, how to make hegemony in India. The first challenge was this, how to make hegemony in India. Second challenge before the Britishers between 1834 to 1838 or say 39, the second concern was a big worry, and they were discussing it at that time when we did not have our first war of independence, that how long we will rule in India. And will Indians be governed through such means as said above, like law and through legitimacy, through hegemony, through modern education, or through introduction of various institutions? So will Indians or majority of Indian will support us or not? That was a big concern among Lord Britishers, and more particularly Lord Macaulay and Charles Trevelyan. Second aspect of worry was, even if we have won the heart and mind of the people of India, how long we can control this winning of mind and heart. Someday someone will come and say whatever you are doing is wrong. Someday someone will come, and that someone will demand independence. See, they were discussing it, again I am saying, between 1834 to 1838, when there was no Indian National Congress. We did not have our first war of independence. They were discussing it. Who? Lord Macaulay, Charles Trevelyan. First, their conclusion was win mind and heart of the people, hegemony. Second, introduce modern education system to maintain the hegemony, and opened various universities in India. Slowly, I am not saying within 4 years they established all these things. Second concern, how long will we survive here, and how long we will continue winning the heart and mind of the Indians, or will maintain this hegemony. Someday someone will come and say we want, or I want, independence. Then what we were supposed to do, what we will do at that time. Because the reality was, the rule of Britishers in India was actually a colonial rule, and no self-respected individual would like to be called as colonial citizen. So they will demand independence because of self-respect. Why? Because they are all humans, and human always love self-respect. Okay? So they were discussing who? Charles Trevelyan and Lord Macaulay. This was the major concern, how to maintain hegemony and whether how long we will survive here in India. Now, Lord Macaulay asked Charles Trevelyan how to deal with this situation in India. For example, if someday someone will come and say, no, we are not accepting your slavery, or we are against your colonialism, or say will demand dignity, will demand respect, will demand independence, or say that we are not ready to be or to accept your hegemony. This Lord Macaulay asked Charles Trevelyan, now in such a situation, what would Britishers do? Again I am repeating, they were discussing it between 1834 to 1838. Charles Trevelyan replied, one day India will get freedom from us, there is no doubt about it. One day India will get freedom from us. That is a fact, a reality. And that is sure because people will rise. Why? Because they will question us. They will question our legitimacy. They will question our rule in India. They will question our hegemony in India. They will question our modern education system in India, or whatever we are doing good for them. They will question everything because whatever we are doing is certainly not legitimate. It's not legitimate in any sense. So Indians will rise one day, and one day they will be free or independent from us. Now, this Lord Macaulay was slightly disturbed. What Trevelyan is actually saying? India will win independence? How? When in 1938 around, Lord Macaulay asked this question to Charles Trevelyan, and Charles Trevelyan said that there are two ways India may adopt to get freedom. Number one, easy way, revolution. Like hair, for example. Hair run fast, And the second is through reform, tortoise. Tortoise walk slow. So Charles Trevelyan replied to Lord Macaulay that there are two ways India will win independence. One is through hair, or it means indirectly revolution, and we are out of India. Second is through reform, tortoise. So if we want to control revolution, we have to put Indians into the path of reform. Macaulay was surprised and asked Charles Trevelyan, how is it possible? And do you really think that whatever we say, the Indians or Indian masses will follow us in such a situation when we won various wars and we fought various wars? Do you really think that you are suggesting any practical idea? Charles Trevelyan replied, yes, the first way, if Indians choose the first way of revolution, keep this in mind, he is replying to Lord Macaulay. He is saying if Indians choose the first way would be violent. The first way would be highly mess wala situation, and it will disturb us in various ways, and it would be fast, very quick. They came, fought and won, and we had to leave India. So the first way is very fast. The second way would be slow and peaceful. What is the first way? Just like here, rain and won, and we have to move out of India. The second way is through tortoise wala rasta. What is that? We will that way would be slow and peaceful, but they will follow us. In any case, Charles Trevelyan said, in any case, India will win freedom from us if they choose path number one, or if they choose path number two, revolution or through social reform. Revolution, quick; social reform, slow and peaceful. So here the answer to the question of Lord Macaulay comes. He said, Charles Trevelyan, that Indian people need social reforms, number one, and number two, awakening of Indian society. Why? Because Indians are seeking reforms, modernity, end of ill practices, and various other things which a modern society simply deny. So, when we put India into the second path of reform, then how India will win independence from us, they will go through social reform. What is the process then? Social reform will awaken Indian society, number one. Number two, they will seek reform in various ways, because Indian society is highly conservative. We have seen patriarchy in its extreme form. We have seen casteism in its extreme form. We have seen upper and lower wala stuff in its extreme form. So everybody will seek reform. The path introduced by us. Us means the Britishers. So we will show them the path of reform, social reform. And they will ask, or they will seek awakening. Number one, they will seek reform. They will seek modernity. They will end all ill practices, right? And at the end, they will ask for the independence. Now, if we do this, we may survive in India for a longer time. But if we can't do it, we must be ready for various war of independence. Not one and two, various. Charles Trevelyan suggested that second process of social reform would be good for us, and we can put India on that way. Slightly surprised, Lord Macaulay asked Charles Trevelyan, and Charles Trevelyan replied that no, there are two types of people in India right now. Who are they? One, who want us to leave this country immediately. Kings, various Badshah, and various Peshwas, and so on and so forth. So there is first community among Indians who want us to leave this country immediately without making any delay. And there is second community, which has a good number, which think that we are here to civilize them. We means the Britishers. So there is first community who want us to leave this country immediately, and there is second community which has a sizable population, wants us to be here to make Indians civilized.